The morning sun over Fort Branson did little to chase away the cold. The desert wind was sharp this time of year, scraping across the shooting range like sandpaper. Dust clung to every surface, no matter how often someone tried to wipe it clean. That someone was Nora Hayes. She wore faded canvas work clothes, a battered green jacket, and gray cargo pants that had seen better years. Her hair, long and chestnut brown, was tied back in a loose braid that still caught stray dust. At first glance, she looked like just another civilian hire, maintenance staff brought in to keep things tidy while the real soldiers trained. Nora swept brass shell casings into neat piles with slow, deliberate strokes of her broom. Every so often she knelt to wipe down the wooden benches, ignoring the echo of rifles snapping in the distance. The young soldiers nearby barely noticed her except to throw the occasional smirk or comment. "Careful with those benches," one private called out with a laugh. "Wouldn't want us slipping on polish while saving the country," the others chuckled. Nora didn't answer. She never did. She had learned long ago that silence was the surest armor. Still, her silence made some of them uneasy. A few whispered that she was strange, too quiet, too watchful. Others decided she was harmless, a nobody who kept to herself. What no one guessed was that every time Nora shifted her position while cleaning, she was mapping the range in her head. Sight lines, wind direction, possible entry points, things that were habits to her, not choices. In the distance, the thud of artillery shook the air. The soldiers dismissed it as another training drill. But Nora's eyes narrowed. That wasn't the dull rhythm of scheduled practice fire. That was closer. Her broom paused mid-sweep. Then, the world cracked open. A shot tore through the glass window at the side of the range, showering shards across the floor. Soldiers dove for cover. One screamed, clutching a bleeding arm. The door banged open. A Navy SEAL, blood running down his shoulder, stumbled in clutching a massive rifle, the Barrett M107, heavy and awkward in his shaking hands. "Sniper, warehouse roof, 1,200 meters," he gasped. His eyes darted around, frantic. "We need a marksman now!" But all the base's snipers were deployed on the front lines. The soldiers here were trainees, none with the skill to counter such a threat. The SEAL's gaze landed on Nora. She froze, broom still in hand. Without hesitation, he thrust the Barrett into her arms. His voice was urgent, almost desperate. "Shoot him, or we all die." For a heartbeat, Nora's face betrayed something no one had seen before, an edge of recognition. The weight of the rifle was like an old friend placed in her hands. The soldiers stared at her, stunned. The quiet cleaner was now holding the most powerful rifle in the base. The weight of the Barrett settled into Nora's arms like a memory she had tried to bury. The long black frame, the bipod folded tight, the unmistakable feel of power balanced on steel and glass. Her callous fingers curled around the grip without hesitation, thumb finding the safety as if by instinct. The room was silent except for the crackle of the wounded SEAL's labored breathing. Every soldier stared at her like she had sprouted wings. "Ma'am," one of the privates stammered, eyes wide. "Do you even know how to?" Nora's sharp glance shut him up. She was already moving. Her body seemed to run on rails laid years ago, swift, efficient, controlled. She strode toward the ladder leading up to the tower without another word, boots striking in steady rhythm against the metal rungs. "Wait!" another soldier called. "She's just maintenance staff." But doubt was swallowed by necessity. Outside, another gunshot slammed into the concrete barrier. Chips of stone sprayed across the range. Whoever was out there wasn't just shooting randomly, he was hunting. At the top of the tower, Nora dropped to prone position, unfolding the Barrett's bipod in one practiced motion. She slid the rifle forward until the muzzle cleared the edge. Dust scattered. Her breath steadied. Through the scope, the world sharpened into a different reality. Heat shimmer rose off the rooftops, making the air waver. Across the base perimeter, over 1,200 meters away, a figure lay prone on the warehouse roof, camel cloak blending with the faded tin. His rifle was already aligned on the gate. Her heartbeat slowed. The chaos below vanished. All that existed was the line between her crosshairs and his skull. Wind tugged at the shot. The sun's glare burned off metal. She calculated without thinking, adjusting elevation 2 clicks, compensating for crosswind. Below, someone muttered over the comms. "Impossible! No one makes that shot!" Nora exhaled. The trigger squeezed. The Barrett thundered, recoil slamming back into her shoulder, but she absorbed it like a wave breaking against stone. The shot ripped the silence apart. Through the scope, she saw the enemy sniper's head snap back, his body collapsing limp across the rooftop. But Nora didn't smile. She didn't flinch. Instead, her scope shifted left. 2 more silhouettes, creeping along the flank. Support shooters. 3 shots in rapid sequence cracked across the range. Each target dropped cleanly before they could raise their rifles. Below, the soldiers stared up at her like they were watching a ghost. The comms crackled. A stunned voice asked, "Who the hell is she?" Nora's voice, calm and steady, came back through the radio. "Maintenance staff." The range below had gone quiet. Soldiers who, moments ago, had mocked her for sweeping floors now stood frozen, their rifles forgotten at their sides. They had just watched the impossible unfold through support cameras and their own eyes, 3 kills in under a minute, at distances beyond what most trained marksmen would even attempt. Nora descended the tower without hurry, the massive Barrett still cradled against her shoulder. Every movement was precise, efficient, like a machine built for this exact purpose. The wounded SEAL, still leaning against the wall, stared at her in disbelief as she reached the bottom. He tried to stand straighter, wincing from the wound in his arm. "Where?" He swallowed hard, eyes narrowing. "Where the hell did you learn to shoot like that?" Nora handed the rifle back to him, barrel pointed down, safety engaged. Her expression was unreadable. "You should get that looked at," she said simply, nodding at his shoulder. "That's not an answer," he pressed, voice rough with both pain and astonishment. "You're no janitor." Nora turned away, scanning the perimeter with a casualness that made the younger soldiers nervous. To her, the fight wasn't over yet. She had seen enough battles to know 1 kill never meant safety. She checked rooftops, fence lines, every angle where an ambush could unfold. The privates whispered among themselves. "Did you see how she knew where they'd be before they moved? Her breathing, man, she didn't even blink when she fired. That wasn't training. That was muscle memory." The SEAL commander arrived minutes later, storming into the range with 2 escorts. His eyes went immediately to the shattered window, then to the soldiers still huddled under cover. Finally, his gaze landed on Nora. For a moment, he just looked at her, expression caught between recognition and disbelief. "Hayes," he said at last, his tone low, almost accusing. The name struck like a thunderclap among the soldiers. You know her, sir?" one asked, incredulous. The commander's jaw tightened. "Yeah. I know her." He stepped closer, voice dropping so only she could hear. "I thought you disappeared after." He cut himself off, glancing at the watching soldiers. His words shifted. "Didn't expect to see you pushing brooms on my base." Nora's eyes, calm but edged with steel, met his. "Not here to fight," she said quietly. "Just here to work." The commander exhaled sharply, but there was something heavy in his look. He wanted to argue, to demand an explanation. Instead, he said, "Well, you just saved a dozen lives. Doesn't sound like someone who only wants to clean." Nora didn't answer. She picked up her broom, as if nothing had happened, and began sweeping the shattered glass from the floor. The air in the range hung thick with tension. The only sound was the brittle scrape of Nora's broom sweeping shards of glass into neat piles. The rhythm was steady, almost deliberate, like she was determined to remind everyone she was still just the cleaner. But no one believed that anymore. The younger soldiers had gathered in a loose circle, still gripping their rifles though their hands shook. Some stared at her openly, others glanced, then quickly looked away, as though they were afraid she might meet their eyes and see straight through them. Private Colton, the one who had made the cruel joke earlier, finally broke the silence. That, he swallowed, voice cracking. That wasn't luck. No one laughed this time. Another soldier whispered, You saw the way she tracked those targets. Nobody does that unless they've been trained. Trained? A corporal shot back. That wasn't training. That was... God, that was professional. Like Tier 1 kind of professional. The commander remained stone-faced, arms folded, but his silence confirmed more than words ever could. Finally, the wounded SEAL, still clutching the Barrett, chuckled grimly through the pain. Boys, you've been sharing your base with a ghost. And you never even noticed. All eyes shifted back to Nora. She said nothing, still pushing glass toward a growing pile. But her posture, straight, calm, unshaken by the firefight, betrayed something deeper than humility. She moved like someone who had lived through storms far worse than this. Private Colton blurted, Who are you? Nora didn't stop sweeping. Maintenance staff. The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. Some laughed nervously, not because it was funny but because they didn't know what else to do. The commander stepped forward, his boots crunching over the fragments. He spoke low but firm. That's enough questions. What matters is, she saved your lives. You'd do well to remember that before you run your mouths. His gaze swept over them like a blade, silencing any protest. Still, even under his order, curiosity burned in their eyes. They weren't going to forget this. Nora finished gathering the glass into a dustpan. She carried it outside, dumped it, and returned with the same quiet efficiency as though nothing had happened. For her, maybe nothing had. But for everyone else, the world had just shifted. The woman they'd dismissed as a nobody had revealed herself as something entirely different, something they didn't yet understand. And understanding was exactly what they now craved. That evening, the shooting range felt different. Word had already spread across Fort Branson like wildfire. A sniper had breached the perimeter. The base should have been vulnerable, maybe even lost, but it wasn't. Not because of the SEALs. Not because of the trainees. Because of Nora Hayes. The maintenance woman. In the mess hall, the story circulated in a dozen versions. Some said she'd hit the enemy from 1,500 meters. Others swore she'd taken down half a squad single-handedly. The truth didn't matter, only the awe did. Soldiers who normally ignored her now glanced up when she walked past with her mop bucket. Their eyes weren't mocking anymore. They were searching. Curious. Measuring. At one corner table, Colton whispered to his buddy. She moved like she's done this 100 times before. She's hiding something. The buddy muttered back. Nobody sweeps floors like that and then picks up a Barrett like it's a toy. They weren't wrong. Nora heard every word. She always did. Years of fieldwork had sharpened her senses, taught her how to listen without seeming to. But she kept her expression still, her posture neutral. She scrubbed a coffee spill off the floor with the same patience she'd shown sweeping glass earlier. The SEAL commander entered, drawing everyone's attention. His arm was still in a sling from an old injury, but his voice carried the weight of authority. Attention, he said firmly. What happened today stays inside this base. No speculation, no stories to family, no posts online. Do I make myself clear? Yes, sir, the mess hall echoed. Nora didn't look up. But the commander's eyes lingered on her, just long enough that others noticed. The rumor mill would only churn harder now. Later, outside under the cold night sky, Nora sat alone on the back steps of the barracks. She lit no cigarette, drank no coffee. She just stared out across the dark range. Her broom rested against the wall beside her. For a long while, the silence was complete, until footsteps approached. It was the wounded SEAL, his arm freshly bandaged, his face still pale. You know, he said quietly, lowering himself onto the step beside her. Maintenance staff don't make shots like that. Nora didn't respond. You saved my life today, he added. I'd like to know who I'm thanking. Finally, she turned her head, eyes shadowed by the moonlight. You don't want to know. The SEAL studied her face, searching for answers she wouldn't give. Maybe not, he admitted. But the rest of these kids, they're already building legends about you. Might be easier if you gave them the truth instead of silence. Nora looked back at the dark horizon. Silence is the truth, she said softly. And with that, she stood, picked up her broom, and walked away. Sleep never came easily for Nora. That night was no different. She lay on her bunk in the small, windowless quarters reserved for civilian staff. The hum of the air unit, the muffled laughter of soldiers down the hall, ordinary sounds, safe sounds. But Nora's mind refused to stay in the present. Nora woke, with her jaw clenched, her hands gripping the thin blanket as if it were a rifle stock. Her pulse hammered in her ears. The bunk room was silent again. Just the hum of the air unit. She sat up slowly, breathing hard, and ran a hand down her face. The past wasn't gone. It had just been buried, under brooms, under dust, under the facade of an ordinary life. But picking up the Barrett earlier that day had torn the ground wide open. And the ghosts were walking again. 5 years earlier, Koran Valley. The mountains rose like broken teeth, jagged ridges clawing at the night sky. Nora Hayes moved with her team through the canyon's shadowed throat, every step a balance between stealth and speed. Their mission had been simple on paper: extract an informant hiding in the valley before enemy fighters closed in. Nothing in the field was ever simple. Nora carried her kit heavier than most, her sniper rifle slung across her back, medical pack strapped to her chest. She was both healer and hunter, a dual role most considered impossible. But Delta had demanded it, and Nora had delivered time and time again. The team reached the rendezvous hut. Inside, their informant trembled, clutching a satchel of documents. His eyes widened in relief when he saw the Americans. That relief lasted all of 30 seconds. Gunfire erupted from the cliffs. The hut exploded into chaos. Nora shoved the informant to the ground, throwing herself over him as splinters rained down. Her team leader, Captain Rourke, barked orders through the comms. Hayes, eyes on those ridges! Everyone else, cover and move! She swung her rifle up, scope finding flashes of muzzle fire along the ridge. One shot, target dropped. Another burst, second hostile silenced. Then a scream. Ortiz hit in the chest. Nora was there in seconds, dragging him behind the broken wall, hands pressing into his wound even as her rifle leaned against her shoulder. Stay with me, Ortiz, she repeated, blood soaking her gloves. She forced gauze into the wound, taped it, checked his airway. Above the gunfire, Captain Rourke shouted, We're boxed in. Hayes, we need suppression now. She looked down at Ortiz, skin pale, breath shallow. She knew he wouldn't last without constant pressure. But she also knew her team wouldn't last if the ridge wasn't cleared. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the impossible choice. Save one. Or save all. She slung her med kit back over Ortiz, whispered, Hold on, then lifted the rifle to her eye. Her shots cracked like thunder in the valley. Enemy fighters toppled one by one, their ambush unraveling under her relentless precision. She bought her team time. She bought them survival. But when she returned to Ortiz, the light in his eyes was already gone. Rourke pulled her away, voice grim. We don't have time, we have to move. Nora's stomach churned as she shouldered her rifle again, the body left behind in the dust. Her hands were steady on the weapon, but inside she felt hollow, splintered. Because she had chosen the team. And lost the man under her care. Nora jolted awake in her bunk, heart pounding. Her eyes burned, throat tight. She pressed her palms over her face, as if she could rub the memory out. But it was etched there, as permanent as a scar. That was the night she stopped being Nora Hayes, Delta Force marksman and medic. That was the night she started running. Morning broke harsh and bright, desert sun glaring off the hangars. The base came alive with the clatter of boots and engines, but Nora felt detached from the rhythm. She went about her routine as though nothing had changed, broom in hand, dustpan clattering, rag tucked in her pocket. But every sweep of the broom felt heavier, every sound sharper. The soldiers were watching her now. They tried to disguise it. Quick glances while cleaning rifles, hushed conversations in corners. But she could feel their eyes following her like spotlights. She didn't acknowledge it. Didn't look at them. She focused on her work, pretending her hands weren't remembering the warmth of Ortiz's blood, pretending her shoulders weren't remembering the kick of the Barrett. But silence only made curiosity grow. "Think she's CIA?" one private muttered as Nora passed. "Nah, I heard Delta," another whispered back. "Bullshit. If she was Delta, why is she sweeping floors? Maybe she's hiding from something." The broom bristles scratched across the concrete, drowning their words. Later, in the supply shed, Nora scrubbed powder residue from the shooting benches. The door opened behind her. She didn't need to look to know who it was. The air shifted differently around certain men. "Hayes," the commander's voice said. She straightened, rag in hand, and turned slowly. His eyes were sharp, hard to read, but they held a weight that came from memory, not rumor. "You saved my operator yesterday," he said, matter-of-fact. "You saved a dozen others too." Nora set the rag down, jaw tightening. "I didn't save anyone. I just pulled the trigger. That's not what the footage shows." He folded his arms, studying her like a puzzle. "You moved like you never left the field. Like muscle memory still owns you." Her silence stretched between them. The commander stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I know about Koran Valley." Nora's breath caught, but her face stayed still. He continued. "I read the debrief. I saw the footage. You held the line when the rest of the team would have been shredded. You carried 2 men out under fire. And yes, you lost Ortiz. But Hayes," he shook his head, "that wasn't failure. That was survival." She clenched her fists, the rag twisting between them. "Tell that to Ortiz's family. You think they blame you?" His eyes softened for just a second. "They call you a hero. You're the only one who doesn't." The words pierced deeper than she wanted to admit. Nora turned back to the bench, wiping the surface with deliberate force. "I came here to clean. Not to fight. Not to lead. Just to work quietly." The commander's silence lingered a moment before he answered. "War has a way of finding people who try to walk away from it." And with that, he left, boots echoing against the floor. Nora pressed both hands to the bench, staring down at the scrubbed wood. His words weren't wrong. But they weren't right either. Because war hadn't just found her again. It had never really let her go. By midday, the whispers had grown into something heavier. Not ridicule this time, but a restless sort of curiosity. In the mess hall, Nora sat alone at a corner table with a tray of soup and bread. She ate quietly, head low, hoping routine would make her invisible again. It didn't. 3 soldiers slid their trays down across from her. Young, sharp-eyed, the kind still knew enough to believe war was glory instead of grit. "Ma'am," one of them started awkwardly. He wasn't mocking her, the title slipped out half by habit, half by instinct. Nora's spoon paused midair. She set it down slowly, eyes flicking up. "I'm not your ma'am. I sweep your floors." The soldier swallowed hard but didn't back down. "With respect, we saw you yesterday. On the Barrett." Another leaned in, voice low. "That wasn't some lucky fluke. You moved like you've done it your whole life." Nora's gaze stayed flat. "Eat your food." But they didn't. The third soldier, bolder than the rest, asked the question directly. "You were Delta, weren't you?" Silence stretched across the table. A few nearby conversations even stilled, ears tilting her way. Nora pushed her tray back and stood. "I was nobody," she said evenly. Then she picked up the tray and walked out before they could press further. Outside, the sun blazed off the tarmac, forcing her to squint. She carried the tray back toward the galley, but her hands were tight around the metal, jaw set hard. She had spent years burying the name Delta. Years convincing herself that scrubbing and sweeping could scrub her conscience too. But now, every stare, every whispered word was unearthing what she tried to kill. As she stepped into the shadow of the hangar, a voice stopped her. Hayes. It was Sergeant Willis, the same young soldier whose life she'd saved with the sniper shot. His arm was still in a sling, but his eyes burned with something fierce. I owe you, he said simply. You don't owe me anything. Nora tried to move past, but Willis blocked her path. I do. You didn't hesitate. You could have let me drop, and nobody would have blamed you. But you didn't. Nora exhaled sharply. Don't turn it into something it wasn't. I just reacted. He studied her for a long moment, then shook his head. No, Hayes. You didn't just react. You chose. And people like me, we noticed that. His words echoed in her chest long after she left him standing there. For the first time since arriving at Fort Branson, Nora realized something unsettling. She wasn't invisible anymore. The week after the ambush felt different. Soldiers who once smirked when she swept past now gave small nods, respectful but cautious. She didn't ask for it, didn't want it, but the change hung in the air like the scent of cordite after a firefight. The commander called her in again, this time not to scold, not to pry. He laid a folder on the desk between them. A deployment order. Scouts spotted movement past the ridgeline, he said. If they probe us again, it won't be like last time. We'll need every shooter on deck. Including you? Nora's chest tightened. The words scraped raw against the wall she'd built inside herself. I'm not your soldier anymore, she said quietly. No, the commander agreed. But you're still theirs. He tilted his head toward the barracks outside, where the men and women she'd once saved were training, eating, waiting for the next fight. You already chose them once, Hayes. That's what haunts you. And that's what makes you who you are. She closed her eyes. Ortiz's face flickered in the dark. The weight of every life saved, every life lost, pressed down. For years she had tried to vanish under the hum of mops and the scrape of brooms. But the truth was as sharp as the rifle she had left behind. She was a soldier. She had always been one. When she opened her eyes, her voice was steady. I'll help defend this place. But when it's over, I go back to my broom. The commander gave the faintest of smiles. Fair enough. 2 nights later, when the horizon lit with tracer fire, Nora Hayes was already on the ridge. Rifle braced, breast steady, scope aligned. The old rhythm slid back into her bones, not as a curse but as a truth. One shot, one life. Again and again, she kept the base alive. At dawn, smoke curled from the battlefield. The soldiers looked at her not with curiosity, not with rumor, but with recognition. Nora didn't smile. Didn't boast. She simply cleaned her rifle, set it aside, and picked up her broom once more. Because she wasn't there for glory. She was there because when war came knocking, even the silent marksman couldn't turn away.